Good evening. Very happy to be here in Thessaloniki. It's very exotic. I'm going to the harbor of Thessaloniki. It's pretty magical. And also, this is pretty much how it is for performance poetry, because I just landed in the airport like an hour ago. It's unlike rock musicians. There is no sound check. There is no warming up. It's just basically hello, You're kicked on stage, and then the monkey have to dance, and then you can fuck off and go back to your hotel, right? That's how it is. That's one major difference. I feel very humbled to be here today because... no, actually, because I'm going to read from my phone like a true millennial. You can see that I'm a true millennial, right? Anyway, I feel very humbled because of all this beautiful input that was already presented, and I actually wanted to ask Georgia if we could make a workshop at some time where we just basically make pieces in every sort of subgenre and style, and to explore every one of all these sort of means of expression within performance poetry. That was really intriguing for me. It's my old academic that sort of wakes up and dances. It's very good. I want to congratulate you for the metro. You just had a new metro, right? It took 100 years to build it, right? Isn't it like that? That they thought of it like 100 years ago and now it's done? That's what happens when public interest meets market economy and technology, right? It just takes 100 years. We'll build it for you, 200 meters long, 2 stations. We have a metro too. It took like 100 years as well. And on that note, allow me to share some reflections on the role of poetry and performing poetry in the transformation of human society towards peace that we all hope for, towards true democracy in the extent that we can never attain it, and sustainable cohabitation on this planet to the extent that it will ever happen. I think as we approach the last half of the 2020s, it would seem that we stand indeed on a threshold of something completely new, because for the first time in recorded history, ladies and gentlemen, we do now possess the technology to literally provide for everybody. We have the means of production to allow everybody a sustainable life in luxury, fully automated luxury. We didn't even have to go to work. We could have fully automated luxury communism around the planet, ladies and gentlemen. We have the technology to do that. 40% of what's grown on this earth of food and produce is thrown away. We could make so much more. If we change the system, so we could actually produce and distribute enough for everybody to have all they need, but we're not doing it. Unfortunately, because while technology itself might be considered a neutral, the ownership of said technology is not neutral. And the present and steadily more centralized ownership of capital and technology seems to prioritize hoarding of resources over the communal distribution. And it seems to prioritize exploitation higher than sharing, and rising inequality and socio-economic oppression is a byproduct. And the myths of transhumanism and overpopulation as systemic traits of the oligarchy is now pretty visible, right? We all believe that, there's too many people on the planet and it's not sustainable with all these people. This apparently, I read, was already a trait of Greek oligarchy in the old days. When there were how many people were on the globe back then? In the rise of the original Greek democracy, how many people were here? 5 million people on the globe, something like that, maybe 10 million. And already back then, they were talking, there's too many people, there's shit everywhere, and they pollute, and we had to get rid of them. So it's a systemic trait of oligarchy, which we now have adopted happily. But you can go to any country in the world and take a train from the train station, and in half an hour, there's going to be nothing there. There's going to be fields and mountains and landscapes, and there's not going to be any people. So I don't believe it's true, simply. But we're here, cloaking in this cloak of this thin veneer of democracy, and the system is really propagating some kind of psychopathic values of aggression and greed as dominating human traits. That's the story we're told, that these are the dominating traits of humans. We're competitive, we're aggressive, we are, greedy, we only think about ourselves, we're egotistic. But I don't believe that that's true, and poetry knows that this is not true. Poets know that this is not true, and the reason why poetry is relevant to people is because everybody knows also inside themselves that it's not true. It's a narrative. It might be a convenient narrative when you were living in a very stressed out everyday life where you have very limited capacity for thinking about anything else than how to scrape together the funds to pay your next bill. But nevertheless, in the past years, we've seen protests from desperate and concerned citizens all over the world, and while the response of truly democratic societies would be one of accommodation and openness to reform, what we see is the opposite. We see the present system of surveillance governance refuses to reform. We see a fortification of power and legislation in citizen surveillance and social control. We see the contours of an iron dome lowering on a global scale, and we see a fully globally developed surveillance infrastructure that only needs a functioning AI to fully end the game for us. And make it very difficult to do any kind of social reform or social rebellion. So basically, the people who decide on this planet, whoever it might be, whether it's on Wall Street or in some hedge fund that nobody really knows who or where, who owns, I think they notice the growing injustice, and there might be some talk of reform, or that's what we're told. But whether it represents a true wish in the 11th or 12th hour, or maybe another diversion of our attention, I don't know. Maybe it's not important. It will probably not be in the interest of the majority of the world's population, the Gaian habitat we are part of, or any other organism on this planet. I think in the battle for obtaining and keeping the ultimate power and control of this planet and everything on it, there are no rules. There are only rules for the middle class. Luckily, there are no rules for poets. I think that's very important, because now I'm going to talk a little bit more about poets, because poets have had many roles, and there's been many narratives spun about poets through times, from the shaman to the oracle to the bard to the fool of the medieval courts, to the sort of spectacle of modern times, where the poet were either completely socially and economically and psychologically dysfunctional, sitting in some basement scribbling along because that's all she could do, or opposite, being on top of society, rolling out beautiful poetry and being very popular like a rock star, right? Now we see an advent of a new narrative of the poet as a functionary who is responsible as any other citizens of the society and part of the society. And in my opinion, this is a very, very dangerous development, because it removes the artistic freedom of viewing things from a certain distance and with a certain freedom of movement, of expression, basically. And I think there is a dire need in this world right now for the advent of the shaman poet, and this is basically what poetry can do. I wrote a lot more about the sort of political state of affairs, but that's not so interesting. I think we should skip to the core. basically, the most valuable and supreme human resource are still somewhat under our individual control as human beings. And this resource is also the most coveted of all resources. And I think you all know what it is. It's attention. It's the human gaze. It's where we look. It's our focus. This is the big. This is where the market is scraping now. This is where we put our attention now. But the attention also is our most valuable asset, basically. Our outer and inner gaze and fixed point. Because this attention is the bridge and the gateway to reality by which perception travels at lightning speed, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the same attention that has provided the basis for everything wondrous in human existence. And precisely the same attention which we are now increasingly directing away from the world around us, away from each other, away from ourselves and our becoming in the universe, and instead are becoming addicted to directing into to this hyper-fictionist, hyper-realm of fictionalized reality that is mediated electronically. So we're being basically lured away from the source and into the simulacrum. And basically this has been, I think, in my humble opinion, has been going on for many years. Even 40 years ago, when school children met and discussed something wondrous that happened, the way we expressed to each other, the way we shared it was just like in the movies. You know, whenever something fantastic happens to you, you'll tell your friends, well, it was like a movie. So the movies, long time ago, has attained hyper reality vis-a-vis our perceived reality, our shared reality. And you have to excuse me. So basically, because of this development, this movement, this place in time space is extremely important, because we are fully taking a head dive into Plato's cave, and there's no going back from there, basically. So one might say that we're looking at some dark and stormy times ahead. That's not news. And all the doom and gloom and dystopian forebodings are really preoccupying a lot of the young people on this planet, and maybe also a lot of little generations. But I don't think that we should let that blow out our flame, because the human flame must prevail. We are eternally blooming flowers, each one of us humans on the planet. And poetry can help us realize this, because poetry, like nothing else, is able to capture the here and now and pinpoint the sensations of being, verbalize the atmosphere, transfer the inexplicable, paint the sensation, and capture the meeting between the self and other, the self and the world. And more than any other artistic expression, in my opinion, poetry is the art of focusing the attention on the moment, in the moment. And it is precisely this attentive and creative head dive into the anatomy of the present that mimics creation itself. And so the gift of poetry is no less fantastic than creation. Its gift, its fruits of shifting attention and position into a quantum realm of existence where everything coincides in the present. This is what poetry can do. In this way, poetry effectively combines human universals and the particular of the eternal in the present moment in a prismatic condensation, both narrative and snapshot. This sounds it's so simple, right? It's like quantum physics. It sounds very difficult, but the way it works, it's like a flower blooming. It looks very simple. It is very simple, but it's very difficult to explain. So following this, poets are perhaps to be the shamans of tomorrow, And like other shamans, the poet transcends the veil between worlds and bring back gifts which can help understand, transform, and transcend the mysteries and challenges of life for people on this planet. Poetry presents visions, dreams, and fantasies. It warns and forebodes. More than anything, poetry embraces utopia, fantasia, and the real in one go. It gives voice to the voiceless. Following this, the voice of the poet is essential in these crucial times, not only through the works of the poet, her poetry, but as a contribution in its own right. The voice of the poets are the voice of tomorrow, and the shamans of the new tomorrow, the rishis of post-modernity. It is crucial that we do not remain silent any longer, because we're fearing of our careers or reputation. We cannot no longer sit in our attics. We need to come out and dance. Performance poetry is, I'm gonna skip the rest of this manuscript, because basically after the last part, I also wanted to do like a piece, right? But I sort of prepared this speech, and I can see now that it's like two things pulling at me at the same time, right? Because I have my inner poet that wants to dance and do its thing, and and then there is the other thing, which is the more sort of academic, dissertative sort of speech about what it is and what it can do. I believe it can do wondrous things, and I believe that a lot of you share this belief, otherwise you wouldn't spend a Friday night here, right? You'd probably be out there dancing and drinking and numbing your skulls and having a great big bowl of Greek salad. So anyway, so that's it. I have been doing performance poetry professionally for 22 years, 23 years, many places around the world, and I've had the good fortune to interact with a lot of audience and interact with a lot of colleagues and a lot of beautiful poets all over the world. And to me, the greatest privilege about that is that it is a very good chance when we meet as poets to find out that we're not alone. Because we see a lot of family resemblance in our peers, no matter where they're from on this planet. And like other professions, bankers, school teachers, assurance salesmen, we instantly get this family resemblance. We have so many things in common. So for the professional development of poets and for the capacity building, I think meeting is just really important, the professional meeting. And a context such as this is a great opportunity for that. And for that, I'm very thankful for you that you invited me here and gave me this chance to hang out with all of you. I think we should also make it a little bit your show, because it is your show. I'm just the dancing monkey, not really dancing right now, but so is there anything that you would like to ask me now that we have each other in this intimate space where it's just us, basically? Don't be shy. You can also do it afterwards, but that's going to be, we're going to have probably cakes or something. I don't know. Good. Okay, thank you for having me. Have a great festival.